Hey everybody, and welcome to a special episode of Deckin Around. Today we are really excited to have Kevin Reylek on the show. Kevin is an avid magician and integral part of the card community as we know it today. But before we jump into it, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And don't forget to ring the bell.
Don't forget to ring the bell. So Kevin, how you doing today, man?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Yeah, we're super glad to have you on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So you're going to be talking at 52 Plus Joker this year about marked cards. And I think, obviously that stems from an interest in Magic. I don't think people really get into marked cards unless they're into cheating poker or Magic. But how did you get into Magic as a hobby / profession?
So getting into it in general, I had seen a magician when I was very small. My dad's company, they would do sort of business trips where family were welcome and they would kind of corral the kids off. So the first time I saw magic, I was 3 or 4 years old. But at that point, I don't think I realized it was something you could learn or, that I expressed interest in wanting to learn. But that's my earliest memory of that. And then when I was 8 years old, my grandmother got me a Mark Wilson thing. It was his video course in magic that I think she probably saw on QVC. And it was just one of those things that, like,
so awesome.
So many people, when you're 8 years old, it's like, oh, well, we'll get them a chemistry set or whatever,
right.
Similar sort of thing. A lot of people get a magic kit or that type of thing when they're that age. And for me, it just really stuck. I watched that video and learned everything on it, and then discovered a couple of years later that there was a magic shop not too far from me. And so I started going there, and, you start with all the gimmicky self-working stuff and eventually graduate into the sleight of hand and everything. And so, yeah, I just got bitten by the bug young and never grew out of it. I think a lot of people, once they kind of get to be teenaged, they kind of lose interest in it. And for me, I'm more interested in it now, almost 30 years later, than I ever have been. So,
that's so cool. Now, I mean, obviously, like you said, dealing with the gimmicks, and then you got into the sleight of hand, and what actually got you into the card side so much, where you just dove so much into the marked side of things? Because obviously, I think there's a whole, there's a whole world around, marked cards that a lot of us don't even know about.
Sure. And my knowledge and expertise in marked cards really comes from the magic side of it. That's really what I've studied and researched and whatnot. So I'm by no means an authority on, like, the gambling side of it. It's something that I always liked. I always liked gaffs and gimmicks, because when you start, again, you're a kid. And so you wind up getting a Svengali deck or these sorts of tricky decks. And I think that's what started me with card collecting in general, because you start having, a little supply of regular decks to do your tricks with. And then you start having sort of different one-trick pony decks where it's like, oh, I need to pull out this deck to do this trick, and I'll put that one away, and I'll pull out this other one. And so I do like versatile trick decks. So something like a stripper deck where you can use that for any trick that uses a regular deck, but it has this extra feature built in. And marked cards are kind of that way, where it's like this kind of extra superpower that you get, and it's like, hey, if you're carrying a deck of cards around with you anyway, you may as well have that in there. And just kind of, I don't remember what the very first marked deck I ever saw was. It was probably one of the ones that was coded that comes with a magic kit, where it's got like a million little circles on it, and it just has a line this way, and you kind of know which way the line is facing.
That was actually mine. Yeah, that was mine.
Yeah, just like a grid of circles, right?
Yeah.
And then, you start finding out about things like the various Deland decks, and then all the various sort of what we would now call reader decks, which that term in and of itself has kind of an interesting history of how marked decks in general used to be commonly referred to as readers, whether they were coded or otherwise. And especially in a time where only coded marked decks existed, that was just another term for marked cards. And now the Magic community, just sort of in the last handful of years, has kind of shifted. And now we're like, hey, no, there's readers and there's coded marked decks. And it's like, well, technically any marked deck is a reader if you go by the 100-year-old slang. But that's kind of the beauty of language. It evolves. So, yeah, I don't know if I fully answered that question well or not about how I got into.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I think that was good. I think that was good.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Go for it, Steve.
What's your, what are the typical types of marked decks? There's like 3 different ones, or like your standard, like you have your reader, You have
So if something coming out these days on the Magic market, is coming out and it's saying like marked deck or whatnot, then my expectation would generally be that it's one of two types: either something where you have to decode, there's some little symbol or whatnot, where it's kind of once you know the system, and there's lots of ones that are clock systems, so you'll have the 12 positions around the clock, and then just some series of 4 things that give you your suit. Or something like a reader, like the Marked Maidens that we did at Penguin, where you're just flat out reading what the suit and value are, where you don't have, there's no teaching required. It's like if you show someone the deck and point to them where the mark is, they've got it. Like there's no learning curve there.
Yeah.
So typically I would expect it to be one of those two sorts of things. And I mean, you can get like more and more kind of subcategorized within there. But broadly, I'd say it's one of those two. And then if I was going to throw a third one in, I would probably say edge marked decks would be kind of different enough to be like a top level category, especially at this point, because edge marked decks were really sort of off everybody's radar for a long time. And then a few years ago when Andre did his butterflies. I backed that original campaign. It wasn't Kickstarter. It was the other platform, which I'm spacing on the name now. Indiegogo. I backed that first Indiegogo, and I was just like, wow, this guy's a genius. And since then, there have been several other Edgemark decks kind of hitting the market. But the more the merrier.
That's so cool. And I don't know. Did you have anything to do? I know you used to work with Alex over at House of Playing Cards, and did you have anything to do with his marking system?
Yes. HOPC. I've known Alex for a long time, since my early 20s, and he was a teenager. He was 18, 19 when we first met. Because I'm a North Carolina native, but after college I moved up to New York, and I wound up living up there for about 7 years. And so Alex and I used to hang out at the magic shops in Midtown all the time. There was Phantasma Magic and Tannins about 3 blocks away from each other. And I'm super glad that I made that move. I progressed more in Magic in my first year in New York than I did for years in North Carolina. And not that North Carolina doesn't have a good Magic scene. Our local IBM chapter, our Raleigh Magic Club, we have several past international presidents of the IBM and whatnot. Steve Beam, if you know his semi-automatic card books and whatnot, he's a member of our ring. So there's a lot of good Magic going on here, but I mean, I'm going to accidentally drop some names here all over the place.
Go for
it. No, I was hanging out in New York, and literally on a Friday afternoon, I would be in there, and I'd be sitting at the table with David Roth, Eric DeCamps, and Simon Lovell, and me. It would be like the 4 of us at a little card table. And then like Ken Krenzel would walk in, it was just like really kind of insane sort of stuff where you just never knew who you were going to encounter.
That's so cool.
And so, that was really great. To be in that environment. So as wonderful as this sort of thing is, as much as we have forums and Facebook groups and video chats and stuff, there's something about living in an area and being live in person with people who are like-minded, whether it's cards or Magic or anything else.
Absolutely.
Where you can really just sort of immerse yourself. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, no, that's cool. How do you come up with a system? I mean, especially for something like the Knock, right, where it's super minimalistic, and in my head, to even think that it's marked for suit or whatever,
Sure.
How did that come about?
That system, there was an ESP deck on the market that was a very similar back to Nox, and it used the different corners because the shocked system, the Spades, Hearts, Clubs, Diamonds, is very well known and used across lots of different decks and Magic tricks, because of that easy mnemonic of the 1 point, the 2 lobes of the heart, etc. And so that was something that we had seen, and so that was sort of the first Knock marking system. And then maybe a year or so before I transferred over to working for Penguin, we had done the first ones that were fully marked for suit and for value. And I want to say that it was the white-backed ones. I think it was the first Alex Pandrea signature Knox.
Nice.
And because they were the white back where we had the black border, I think it was my realization, but so much of what Alex and I did was like as a team, so we'll do mutual credit. But it was the thing of like, hey, we have these outer corners that we can use for suit, if we use a binary, and there are several mark decks that have used binary where you're using the 1, 2, 4, and 8, and the different combinations of that will add up. So, you know, if you see your 8 and your 1 areas kind of engaged, then you know that that's a 9. And so I was like, okay, you know, we have these 4 corners. We can apply a 1, 2, 4, 8 binary and use the inner corners as value marks, and we can fully mark like the plainest knock to date.
Wow, that's cool.
And we were working with Randy Butterfield at the time. He did the actual design and pixel pushing on that, because the other issue there, when you're doing just the suit, the orientation of the card doesn't matter, because you can look at it and you say, hey, if there's 2 pointed corners and 2 round corners, it doesn't matter if the 2 points are up here or on the bottom, you still know it's a heart either way. Yeah. Whereas with the binary for the value, there was very specific with the 1, 2, 4, and 8 corners that you needed to know which way was right side up. So on the top borderline, we put just like the slightest little imperceptible curve so that you would know which way the cards were up. It was very hard to see, but once you knew it was there, you could kind of tune it in and then do the counting and stuff. And those systems are really fun for me. With the Nox, the suit is still a great way to go, because I know some of the Nox have been fully marked and some haven't, and I've lost a little bit of track over the last few years of not being directly involved in them. I tend to prefer decks that aren't coded in terms of what I use. So the decks that I actually use when I perform are the Penguin Marked Maidens. I use the DMC Elites from DMC and Phil Smith. Nice. And then I have my own system that I call Mainframe for Tally-Ho Circlebacks. Nice. And so all 3 are readers, and I kind of actively switch between those because it's the speed of getting that marked.
Right.
And so for a lot of
stare
things,
at the card for that long.
Yeah. And so I've seen there are some readers on the market where I feel like they just like put that they're marked for as a selling point rather than as an actual useful feature, because you'll get the cards and the marks will be like under a millimeter. And so it is a reader, you know, it'll say A and S, or it'll be an A in a little spade shape, but it's so small that you would have to squint or get really close or take a lot of time. And these theories of performance with marked decks are very old. If you check out Al Baker, his book Pet Secrets from 1951, he has some really great concepts and advice for performing with marked decks, and just like the ease and speed at which a magician needs to read the cards in order for the magic to be deceptive, and for audiences to just not immediately go to that route of, oh, he used a marked deck. And so I think that's where you see that big difference. You know, with gamblers, they need the very most subtle mark that can stand up to, you know, studying and scrutiny and whatnot, because in a lot of those situations, they have a really long time to be able to read the card, whether it's in their opponent's hand or whatever the case may be. They don't need to read it in a fraction of a second. Whereas when you're performing magic, you really do sometimes have just, you know, half a second to see a mark. And if it's minuscule or coded or something, you know, and I've produced coded marked decks and I don't dislike them, I just don't perform with them. So it's like as fast as I can read them or whatnot. Like I have these Delands in front of me, these Delands that we did at Penguin, the Daisy and Nifty Centennial. So these are coded.
Yeah, Steve and I just took a look at those the other day. They're actually beautiful back design on them.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I can't take credit. Like Deland created those 100 years ago, but so we weren't going to change the core structure of the system and how it worked. But as far as a coded deck goes, like I can read these almost as quickly as a reader. But yeah, for me, that's very important. And so I will see people who are concerned. They'll see some of the marked decks, whether I was involved with them or anything else. So like the DMC Elites, Phil's a friend, and he and I have worked together. Obviously, he and I worked together on the Deland Centennials, and we've done a few other projects. But I have nothing to do whatever with the DMC decks other than being a fan. And people like those marks are 3/4 of an inch tall. But it's really saved me. I was performing, this was a few years ago, for a really skeptical person. It was a friend of a friend, and she liked magic. And so we're going through some routines. And I was like, oh, you know, spread the cards out on the table and just slide one card out towards you. And I'm thinking like, I'll have all the time in the world to get this read. She took the card out, fully covered it with her hand, and then slid it all the way to the end of the table. We were in a restaurant, so this is like a long table that we had 10 or 12 people at. And so it was a good 9 feet away from me or something. It was far. And I'm thinking, like, if I was using any other deck right now, I would be just like up the creek without a paddle. But because of those big marks, I was able to get the read. And it made it that much more impossible in her mind, because she knew she had covered the card. She knew it was a mile away from me. And so when the trick was still successful at the end, she just had no direction to go in terms of method. And just blew her away. So yeah, use big marks on your decks if you're performing Magic. You know, if you're cheating in a card game, which I don't condone or recommend, then use something more subtle.
That's too funny. So now, obviously, marked cards is going to be your discussion at 52 Plus Joker this year. But how did you get involved with 52 Plus Joker?
I'm just a member at 52 Plus Joker, so I'm not an officer or anything.
Okay.
The club first came on my radar around, I want to say it was 2012, probably, when they did the convention near Cincinnati, Erlanger area, where they were kind of doing a tie-in with USPC. And just kind of buzz went around. I'm sure I just read it on a forum or something somewhere. Hey, this convention's going to be, going and doing a tour of USPC. And I remember being like, oh man, like I want to go do that. And so then it was sort of on my radar from there. I think the following year was Vegas. And then I know the year after that was Charleston, which that I really wanted to go to because that was drivable for me, just popping down into South Carolina.
Yeah.
And just, conflicts with other scheduling things, I wasn't able to do it. But I had been working with Randy Butterfield a fair bit. We started working with him at HOPC in 2012 with the Ornates. And I still work with Randy. To give you a little tease project, we may or may not have a new version of Honeybees coming at some point in the future.
Nice.
Nice. But Randy's a super great guy, very talented, and he had gone down to Charleston, and he was like, "Man, you have got to go to this convention." And I was like, "I'm trying." I'm like, I just couldn't make it up to Vegas, couldn't make it to Charleston. So in 2015, it was in Orlando. And Mark Stutzman was announced as being on the lineup and everything. And I'd been a fan of Mark since the very first Blaine decks had come out in 2006.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, if there's any that I have to make sure I go to, I'm getting my butt down there. And so joined the club, went to the convention, and I've been every year since. So I've been to 5 or 6 of them now.
Nice.
Sweet.
Yeah, I've been to 5 now. So this year will be my 6th. And it's just an amazing organization, not only for the wealth of knowledge of the members, but just like the level of community and family. I showed up at that first convention in Orlando, and one of the first people I met was Judy Dawson, which for anyone watching, if you don't know who Tom and Judy Dawson are, go put their names into Google, go buy the Hockman Encyclopedia, because you'll reference that all the time for your card collection. And Judy was so sweet and welcoming and just like this bundle of energy. And she just made everyone feel like family just immediately. And I've been to a lot of Magic conventions over the years. I've been going to Magic conventions for about 20 years. And I've been to big ones and small ones. And I've never been to one that I hated. And they're always a lot of fun. And I can't say that like 52 Plus Joker is better than a Magic convention. I'm sure it is if you're only into cards and you care less about Magic. But it's just a very different vibe. And it's just so interesting because you learn from so many people. People come just not from over the country, but from around the world. And as much as we all like to fancy that we know a lot about the whole genre and industry, because we're like, oh yeah, it's playing cards, I know a lot about cards. And it's like, for me, I've been producing cards for over a decade. And so like, yeah, I know a lot about the things that I do. But in terms of people who are like singles collectors, or whether they're into bridge sets or really true antique stuff, there's just like all these people you can learn from. I'm going to forget the guy's name. I'm sure you can check with Lee Asher and he would know off the top of his head. A few years ago, someone presented on Coca-Cola decks at the convention. And I was like, what's this going to be about? I'm like, how much could you talk about other than like, oh, Coke put their brand on card backs. But it was fascinating. It was so interesting. And that was this guy's particular niche. I wish I could remember his name. I apologize if he's watching. And yeah, that was it. And so, like, you know, you have so many people who collect a very targeted thing within cards. And that's happened to everyone, I think, because like I used to collect very broadly with modern decks. You know, I was in college when the first Illusionist Black Tigers came out, and I fully credit them for kicking off kind of the modern custom deck craze. And so got the Black Tigers, and then the Ghosts came out, and on and on and on. And for a while, you could be a completist. You could buy a brick of everything that came out because there was only a few new decks a year.
Yeah.
Now with Kickstarter, we've got 20 new decks a month, and you just for space. And I mean,
Dude,
like right now, I have an okay frame.
Yeah, there were 16 new decks this week.
There you go. So 50 new decks a month.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and so you just can't keep up. As much as I try and keep my finger on the pulse, and I would love to buy as many decks as are out there that I think are interesting or beautiful or whatnot, it's just everyone has a limited budget and limited space. So it's like, you know, I cleaned things up so that my office looks tidy. Anywhere outside this frame, there are just piles and stacks of cards everywhere. And so it got to a point where I just couldn't be a completist anymore. And it would be then, you know, you'd start paring down quantity. So you'd be like, well, instead of buying a brick of everything that comes out, I'm just going to buy half a brick or 3 decks or 2 or whatever. And you just hit a point where you're like, as much as I would like to, you know, if I was a millionaire with a warehouse, the story would be different. But, and so that was then one thing where I started really honing in on marked cards. I was like, I just find them fascinating. I like the different systems. I like the tie-in with Magic and that I can perform with them and do things that wouldn't be possible otherwise with a standard deck. And so that's my thing. And then other people collect solely Bicycle branded or solely Congress or, you know, whatever sorts of brands, or they collect particular designers. So it's fascinating, and you get that at the convention, and everyone's passion is contagious. So like, even though I'm not particularly into the Congress brand, I have nothing against it, but it's just not what lights my fire. But you know, you go and just to hear anyone talk about something that they're passionate about, to me is interesting.
Like
because
Kevin?
it's like, well, yes, exactly, like Kevin. And yeah, you just create really great friendships and relationships with people who then you can go and say, hey, you know, have you seen this? Do you know about that? So yeah, I just highly, highly recommend it. And that's one thing then that's really exciting about this year going virtual. Obviously, it's unfortunate, and we have kind of this worldwide crisis going on. But I'm so glad that Lee and the board decided to have a virtual event rather than canceling, because that would have been the easy thing to do. They could have just said, hey, we're canceled. We'll see you next year. And so I've talked to Lee a little bit, you know, and I don't have a whole picture of all the surprises he has planned, but he's told me a few of the things. And so for me as a speaker, it's a little exciting. I was a speaker last year as part of a panel discussion of designers and creators, and we were kind of talking about the current marketplace of cards. And so I had been wanting to do something on marked cards for a couple of years, and I'd mentioned it to some guys. And so just Lee and I talked about it and decided that 2020 was a good year for it. And so I'm kind of excited that I get to pre-record it, because I can fully really map it out and everything and do multiple takes if I stumble over my words or anything. But more so, I think it's going to be great for the club, because I think there's going to be a lot that's open access. So as wonderful as the convention is, it's a very real thing that not everyone can take the time or the expense to travel to whatever city and spend a few days there and all that. Like, it really is something that you have to plan for, and just not everyone can do that. And there are so many people out there, you know, there's thousands and thousands of card collectors who would love to be part of that convention, and it's just not practical for them. You know, someone out in Indonesia, it's not easy for them to fly to Charlotte, North Carolina for a convention. So that's really exciting that we'll have, ideally, I'm sure, you know, that much greater level of participation, because every year that I've been attending, attendance has increased, which is great. But I think this year more than ever, there's going to be that many more eyes on the club, and just sort of all the interesting things you get, because you get the print magazine quarterly, and you get the monthly digital newsletter magazine, and just this connecting network of people who are so knowledgeable and passionate. And it's one of those areas where it's like, the more you learn, the less you know, sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's like I'm like sitting here like I know a lot about cards, and then I sit and talk to Lee Asher for an hour, and I'm just like I don't know anything about anything.
Which is so exciting. I think you're 100% right with the online this year. It's going to be such a great opportunity, and I think one of the really cool things about it is, for archiving purposes, this is content that's going to be forever there. You know, historically, yeah, they may have recorded some of these guest speakers. They may not have recorded guest speakers, but ultimately these are going to be online from the jump. And hopefully, you know, whether it's members only going forward or still open access, this is a wealth of knowledge and history of playing cards that will forever, or as long as the internet survives, be available to people.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's great. And yeah, I think most years, certainly the first few years that I went to the convention, there was little, if anything, that was recorded. Last year we did some live streaming to Instagram. But yeah, this year I think is going to be the first year that more or less the entire convention is there for posterity. And yeah, you know, anyone who tunes in for all the free content, I don't know how much is going to be totally open and free versus what things are going to be members only. I think a vast majority is going to be just open access.
I believe so as well.
Yeah. Even with that said, join the club. It's so inexpensive. And again, like I'm not like a board member. I don't make any, you know, voting decisions about the club. It's just something that I'm a paid member and have really gotten a lot of value out of my membership and out of going to the conventions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think supporting things like this going forward for the conventions, whether they go back to physical next year or whatever, that little those minimal membership fees really do go a long way to providing amazing experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
So Kevin,
and it's so inexpensive. You know, it's not like $100 a year or something. It's like $25 or something like that.
Yeah, it's really not bad. I think you can. I think you can. If you do like a 3-year deal, they knock a good amount off too. It's like really,
it might be like $60 for 3 years.
I think it's
that's
60
what
for
I
3 years.
Do now. Yeah,
so which is great.
It's less than $2 a month.
Yeah, you know? It's the price of a deck of cards basically. So you give up one deck for access to a great community.
Yeah.
So I think for anyone who's listening, who you know is now excited to see Kevin speak about marked cards, especially because there is so much to know about this. What's one thing that you would say is the last kind of hook to draw someone in to come and check out your presentation that you're doing?
We're going to be talking about a lot of history. So if you're a history buff, we're going to talk about at least 100 years worth of marked deck history. We're going to talk about modern creation. So if you're a user of like the Penguin marked cards or doing the stuff with Phil Smith, I'll show you a little sneak peek here. So when I knew that I was going to be a speaker this year, I was like, okay, the convention's in October. My talk's on marked decks. I was like, we need to do a marked deck that's a Halloween theme. I was like, that'll be great, because the convention for the last few years has done a deck debut night. And it started with the club deck. So for the last handful of years, and there's going to be a series of at least 10 of these. So there's a perk to be a member. I believe that you have to be a member to be able to purchase the 52 plus Joker club decks.
Yeah.
And they're designed by super talented people. We've had them done by Jackson Robinson, Paul Carpenter, Mark Stutzman, Alex Chin, Randy Butterfield. I don't think I'm missing any.
Lautrec.
Yeah, Lautrec. Yeah, did the last one there. I'm missing the most recent one. My brain. But so, yeah, all these sort of superstars of card design, and you have to be a member to buy those decks. But so the deck debut night started in the first couple of years where they were just debuting the club deck. And then when I was there in Orlando, we just happened to have the honeybees get done just in time that we were able to overnight a gross of them from the factory down to Orlando. And I was able to debut those there. And there was like maybe 1 or 2 others as well that got shown off. Nice. And so for subsequent years, we decided, okay, we're going to have this be like a full-on deck debut night. And so things would be kept totally under wraps. The first time these decks were seen anywhere in the world was at that event. And then they would be released online for sale later, either, you know, weeks later or in some cases months later. Bill Kalush, who runs Expert, he would debut stuff at 52 plus Joker and not release it to the market until like 6 months later.
That's awesome.
So yeah, if you like exclusives and stuff. So I don't know how much that's going to work now this time. And so also this deck we have, it's produced by Penguin. So the original goal was to debut it at the convention as part of the deck debut night. We may have it come out a little earlier in October because it is Halloween and we want it to get into people's hands. Yeah, but I'm not going to do the whole. I'm not going to do the full reveal here on this chat. We'll do it certainly at 52 plus Joker and whatnot. But It's the Screams at Midnight deck. It is not only it's not only a marked Halloween deck, it is in 3D. So it will come with a pair of 3D glasses.
Nice.
And it's something that I worked with Phil Smith. And so, as you guys know, Phil Smith is a superstar genius of marked cards and design in general. Yeah. And this is a totally new marking system. So it's not similar to what he used on the DMC Elites. It's not similar to any marked deck you've seen before. They are readers, but they're readers done in a way that has never been done before.
That's cool.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm very excited about those. These ones that I have here are just MPC prototypes. The decks themselves are at USPC right now, getting printed and finished up. But
nice.
We'll have them in time for
new
October.
MPC decks or the new stock they're printing on.
They're very good. I've been using MPC for prototypes since probably 2012, 2013-ish. And they've just, over that span of 7-8 years, continued to improve and improve and improve. So, yeah, you get that 310 or whatever they're calling their thing now. They're linen finish.
Yeah.
On the beta finish. So, yeah, linen stock with beta finish and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's super usable, so really good.
The changes they've done in just like 6 months with that is just crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. The print quality, I will say, and again, giving them full credit that when they're delivering a one-off digital print, it's super great for what it is. But when you compare the print quality of a digital, so like if I were to show you side by side right now, like Emperor prototypes versus the real Emperor decks, that level of resolution and detail that you get from the real offset printing is noticeably better.
For sure.
But still, I'm not unhappy at all with this prototype here that I'm teasing you with.
Nice. I'm excited to see that deck. It's another good reason for anyone to check out 52 Plus Joker, though, to get this, like you said, check out these debut nights and see what new decks are coming up in the next days, weeks, months, or years. The debut nights are
so exciting, and I've been part of them, but also I just love being like a spectator to them, especially when Alex Chin, who has run Seasons playing cards, super nice guy. And that's something that I'll say about all these designers. Like, if you want to meet and interact with designers, there's another reason to join the club and participate with the convention. Because if you want to just like sit and talk with Jackson Robinson or Randy or any of these people, or the industry factory people, like the USPC custom division shows up, Bill Kalouche shows up from Expert, Murphy's Magic shows up, Years from Cardamundi shows up.
Awesome.
So, obviously there's that access now with virtual, but once we can resume the physical ones, it's a few days of just like card insanity.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
That's awesome.
But so Alex, that was the one thing I wanted to mention, that the things that he's debuted, because I don't know how that guy's mind works. He's a genius, and so he's like, here's the kind of idea and starting point that I went with. He's like, and then I branched off in these 7 different directions, and so here's all these options of this deck. And I mean, he's so dedicated. He got National Playing Card Day like a recognized official holiday, and so he does his National Playing Card Day deck, and then he usually has something else. And he's just like, I tried this new technology or this new thing, and I'm just like, what?
The innovation.
It goes so beyond putting like foil or gilding on cards.
That's for sure.
Which we love to see.
Him and Lotrek are definitely in their league of their own. That's for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, that's cool, dude. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Yeah.
Dude, absolutely. We're really looking forward to checking out the your discussion on marked decks, and obviously just chatting with you more in the future in general. I mean, I think you've got as much as you may say you know a lot, but you don't know much in the world of playing cards, you obviously have a very specific wealth of knowledge on your own too, and we'd love to chat more. Pick your brain about all that.
If we want to talk about production, because I produced my first deck. I did my first self-produced deck in 2009, and then I was director of production for HOPC Blue Crown for a handful of years, and now I've been with Penguin for a little over 5 years. So, I mean, I've done over, I don't know, somewhere between 200 and 300 print runs at this point, certainly over 1 million decks printed. So in terms of that little specific niche, I can speak to that quite a lot. Yeah.
We have a lot to talk to you about, that's for sure.
We do, without a doubt. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. For anyone who's curious, the convention this year will be October 14th to the 17th. It'll all be online, so make sure to check out 52plusjoker.org. Kevin, as well as some other great speakers, will be having really interesting presentations if you have any interest in playing cards, Magic, marked cards, all of that. I mean, I think there's so much overlap within the community, so it kind of gives you some great information across the board there. 52plusjoker.org. Make sure to check it out.
Thank you so much. And
thank you, guys. Take it easy.